want it to reconstitute while I'm cutting the vegetables. So just put that in there, put the heat on, and let it start to cook. And in the meantime, we're going to cut some vegetables up here. So let's talk about the different types of vegetables that there are. You know, every day you want to have an onion family member. So today what we're doing is using a leek as our onion family member. It could be, you know, a white onion, a red onion, a yellow onion, whatever you like. But today I'm going to use a leek. You know, leeks are just really great. It started out looking like this, of course. And I took off the dark green leaves because those are tougher. But you still could use, you know, more of the lower part of this. But for this dish, I'm going to use the light green and the white parts of the leek. And you want to cut the leek in half so you can see inside. And then you want to open up these layers and make sure that there's no dirt in there. There's a little tiny bit of dirt right there. And the rest of it should be clean because I already washed this, but I'm going to wash it again really quickly right now. Okay. So I'm going to just finish slicing the leek for this dish. I also took off the bottom of it, and I'm just going to put that in our compost here because we're not going to eat that part right now. So with the leek, I'm just going to slice it. And ideally you want to face your cutting board. Shall I work over here, Michael, or can I work over here? Okay, this way also? Great. I'm asking my colleague here, Michael, how to best serve you with this. So I'm going to just slice it like this. Ideally you face your cutting board, add a straight back, and this is really ideal because the cutting board should be right below your navel, basically, so you don't have to bend over a lot like that. And that's what we've got going here. So here's our leek right here. You can add it to the other leek that I had cut earlier. And when you move things around when you're cutting, just use the dull part of your knife. You know, either this part here or this part here. You don't want to dull the sharp part, so always move things around with the dull part of your knife. It'll last a lot longer that way. So we're covering ourselves with an onion family member. You know, onions are one of the oldest plants on the planet, the onion family, the allium family. It also includes garlic. So it's known as a food that we should really have every single day. We should have, you know, like probably a quarter to a half an onion or more per day. It's really a blood cleanser. Will help to counteract any kind of infections and things like that. There's all sorts of folklore and science on onions. So I recommend trying to have one every day, at least part of one. So in this case, we're using the leek. Then the next most important food group in terms of vegetables would be the root vegetables. So we're going to have some carrot in this. And all I've done for the carrot is cut it in half, and then I'm going to do half moons, as we call it. Put those with the other ones. And the other vegetable that we're using today is, of course, the greens. We're going to have greens in this soup, too. So we're going to start out by putting some cabbage in the soup. So today I bought a Savoy cabbage. They're also always so pretty. Got a little one like this. And really half of this cabbage is the 3 cups that we need for this soup. And I've already cut that up for you. You can just cut out this center part here and slice it really fine and include that. And eat that as well, because it's really a good food too. So these are our greens, and of course cabbage. The cabbage family is a huge family of greens, including kale, collards, and lots of others. So enjoy any kind of cabbage. They're all really good. We're going to also use a different kind of vegetable that doesn't fit into any of the groups we've talked about so far, and that would be the shiitake mushroom. Again, like we just used in the kombu shiitake broth, which you may or may not want to use as an option to water in the squash soup. But for this one, I'm just going to cut it in slices. So we've got 4 large takis for this particular soup. Okay, now if we wanted some bright green in there, which of course we do, we're going to add at the end of making the soup some arugula. So I've got that here cut up, and you can see, I think everyone knows what arugula looks like. So it's a really wonderful spicy green that's bright green in color. But arugula cooks pretty quickly, so I'm just going to add it right towards the end of making the soup along with the miso and the ginger. Another thing you can do with the soup, and before we go there, I think I'll show you what's happening here. Here's the seaweed that we put in the pot, and you can see how it's reconstituted. Now this is the wakame soft kelp now, and it's really got 2 wings on it. This is sometimes called winged kelp. So it's got the 2 wings on the side, and what you want to do is just put that on your cutting board and cut on either side of the midrib, center midrib, and that'll be kind of hard in there, but you can slice that finely and it will cook in the same time as the soup. So that's what I'm going to do. And then the rest of it, you just want to cut, in little squares so that it will be just part of the soup that will melt in your mouth. We'll take the rest of this out and do the same. It's always nice to have a flat strainer, what they call a skimmer. It's a great tool to have in the kitchen for things just like this job. Put that over here and let it cool for just a sec. And this is still coming to boil. I'm going to add our vegetables now. And when these, the root vegetables, like the onion, starts to get tender, I'll also add the cabbage. Just wait a minute on that. So this will be a thick soup, have a lot of vegetables in it. Okay. So we'll finish off on the seaweed here. I think this is an important part of the soup to see. And then we'll cook at the same time as the other vegetables cook. We'll turn that up a little bit. Now you could add some other seaweed to this if you wanted to, like dulse or nori at the end. But this is kind of the standard seaweed soup, seaweed for soups. I want you to see that. Here's one more that I'll do. We'll just cut it in little squares, and then we'll cut the center midrib tinier. There we go. So anytime you feel tired or kind of out of sorts, which kind of shows you're in an acid condition, make a miso soup. Miso is very alkalinizing, as are vegetables, of course. So this is a great alkaline soup. And it's very traditional. I studied macrobiotics back in the 70s, and our teachers once told me that if I ever counseled with anybody about their diet and their health, I had to share this recipe. So I do. And I do in my counseling sessions, and love teaching it once a year in cooking classes, usually in January when everybody's ready to make their resolutions. It's a good time to learn how to make this soup. But you can see you could put any vegetables in here, really. Anything can go in here. You just want to make sure you're including some seaweed, roots, greens, tubers, whatever you like. And we'll add the miso at the end so you can see how that works. Okay, so that's going fine. So we'll add the greens, and we'll also add some tofu. The tofu I'm using today is a local brand, Wildwood, and they actually sprout the soybeans before they make the tofu, which is another way to make it more digestible. So it's a really, really good thing. And the tofu I got is kind of a firm, but not super firm. And when you don't use part of the tofu, just put it back in the container and add some fresh water and put it in the fridge like that until you're ready to use it. Now tofu is a really great protein source, so it's a really nice one to use particularly in the soup if you're not having beans at the meal or something like that. Okay. Another thing that I often add to this soup is kale. And if I do add kale instead of the cabbage, usually what I do, instead of cooking it in the soup, I usually cook it separately, like for a kale side dish that you would have at dinner. And then I'll use some of that for dinner that night and have a little bit left over, and I'll just add it to the soup when I serve it. Because it's nice to have a bright green in the soup. But if you leave some bright greens in there, they'll turn that kind of olivey green color, which isn't as attractive. So that's why I like to add the fresh green right before I'm going to serve it, whether it's arugula or some kale that I've cooked for another dish or something like that. Okay, so that is starting to boil. I'm sorry that you can't see all this. I think I'll just hold it up so you can see it the best possible. Can you see that at all, Michael? Maybe not. Okay. So it's starting to boil there. I'm going to add the tofu. And I'm also going to add the cabbage. And give it a good stir. Now everything is just submerged, so it's really perfect. It's going to be a really nice thick soup. I'll show you what it looks like right now is this. You see that? There's some nice carrots in there too, but they seem to be at the bottom at this point. So that'll just take about 5 minutes. That's really all this soup takes. Let that continue to cook. Turning it up so it'll go faster. And let's talk about the miso for this soup. So you can see we've added miso to both soups. We're adding different types to each of the soups. I almost always add miso to my soups. If I make a Tuscan white bean soup, I'll add a white miso because it won't compete with the color of the beautiful beans. In this particular case, I'm making a very traditional vegetable miso soup with tofu, fresh shiitake mushrooms, and ginger. So I'm going to combine a couple of misos for this soup, and that's something you can do too. This is a brown rice miso over here, and this is actually a chickpea miso. So I wanted to show you two different kinds here. Brown rice miso, I've gotten it from the same company that we used earlier, the Miso Master. Every time you open one of these misos, you'll see this little cover on it. It says miso soup consumption linked with up to 50% reduced risk of breast cancer. And these are scientific studies that have been done. And certainly Japanese people are still the longest lived people on the planet, especially the Okinawans. It's a wonderful book to read about them called Healthy at 100 by John Robbins. It's really fun. And they have very low rates of cancer, and in the elders, there's really hardly any. So one of the things they do is every day they have some sort of soup with miso in it. That's one of the things that has been traced to their longevity. So this one is a brown rice miso that's actually cooked, and there's also soybeans in here. And then they inoculate it with a bacteria and salt, and let that sit for like 1.5 years, and it ferments, and then they puree it to make the miso. I've actually made this myself before, but it's so nice to be able to buy all these varieties now. So this is a brown rice miso. It's dark. You can see that our soup is really cooking there. I'm going to turn that down now. It'll be ready before you know it. The other miso that I'm adding to this soup is a chickpea miso. And some people are not eating soy right now, so you might want to use chickpeas instead of soybeans. And that's what this miso is really lovely that way. It's based on chickpeas, of course, instead of soybeans. And you can see what a blonde color it is. So I'm using a little bit of that in here too. And you, of course, you could use only this in the soup. It's totally up to you, whatever type of soup you like to make. And for people that aren't eating gluten, also, there's also barley miso. That's considered really a healing miso in Japan, the most healing miso. But you wouldn't want to use it if you're not eating gluten. So these are two that you can use because they don't have any gluten grains in them at all. So either way, the brown rice miso and the chickpea miso. So all we're going to do for the miso is to take a little bit of the soup broth. You can just have a heat-proof bowl to do this, and dip it in here. Take a little bit of that out. Give this a stir. It's looking great. And you want to mix that together with a little wire whisk. This will just dissolve by itself if you're going on to do something else, but since we're pulling it together right now to serve this soup, you want to dissolve the miso in the broth before you add it. And the only other ingredient we have to add to this is our ginger, and of course our arugula. So here's a nice fresh piece of ginger. And all that we're going to do to add this to the soup, you can see it's very, buff colored here. There's no darkness on the outside of this. It's a really pretty fresh piece of ginger. But whatever kind of ginger you can get at the store, just, peel off some of the skin. We want about a tablespoon. Some people peel off the outside with a spoon. I just cut it off like that. And then you want to take a nice grater that's got really small holes on it, because that'll make the finest ginger. And I'm just going to add this right now to the soup. We want about a tablespoon. And that's, a 1-inch piece like this will make about a tablespoon. And we'll just add our greens along with this. The beauty of this is that, you don't get any of the fiber in there. But if you would like to just slice it, that's fine too. Okay. You can see here's the really fine part of the ginger. Okay. I'm also going to add the arugula at this point. Give it a stir and add the miso, and we'll be done. And then I'll show you what it looks like in there. So the arugula will cook in about a minute, so that's really all you need. And if you didn't have arugula, just have some green onions. Anything that you can just put on the top that's really nice, bright green color. Okay, so let's add our miso. Now once you've added the miso, you don't want to boil it, the soup. You just want to very gently simmer it. Because, miso is a natural probiotic. So it's a fermented food, and you don't want to, kill the ferments. But you do want them to, blend and meld with the soup. You just want to cook it for a couple of minutes. And when you reheat it, just reheat it gently. Don't bring it to a rolling boil. That looks delish. I'm going to show you what it looks like now. So here's our soup. I like to get a little bit of carrot in there too. So. And this is a very traditional, very tasty vegetable miso soup. Hope you can see that well. But you get an idea here. You can't see it in there, you can see it right here. It's just packed with really good ingredients, and it just makes you feel grounded and stable. So thank you so much for joining me today for this cooking video. I hope you'll join me in cooking classes. Also, come to my website, healingcuisine.com, and see which classes are coming up. I also do private classes, so please give me a call for that. And love doing counseling one-on-one with people. You'll see that on the website as well. Food coaching, nutrition counseling. I'm a nutrition educator and an award-winning cookbook author. I have 3 cookbooks that I've done in the last 35, 40 years. And the dessert book I did, Sweet and Natural, did win an International Cookbook Award. So I'd love to serve you, and here's to your health and happiness. Thank you.